kind of coming back to where we started around the achievement orientation, right? I grew up with this real strong pull for achievement. And with that orientation, kind of, side by side, other side of the same coin is this desire for approval, right? I want my parents to approve of me. I want people, my teachers, my community to approve of me. I'll add a little layer that, I grew up in a South Asian household, and there was an expression in our culture. They say, "Log kya kenge," which any of your brown listeners will know means essentially, what will other people think?
Mm.
It's not, does this bring you joy, or is this fulfilling to you, but what will other people think?
Wow.
And that became the filter through which I think I lived my life for a long time. Not, does this bring you intrinsic joy or motivation, but what will other people think of this choice that you made, of this thing that you did? And so I, kind of came up through my career, and everything that I was deciding about the way I showed up at work, the way I behaved, what types of calls I wanted to make, what I would wear, who I would do it with, was, okay, but is this palatable to everyone else? Is this what successful henna should look like or should sound like? And so when it came to anything that I thought could be perceived as ruffling a feather or risking disapproval, as extroverted as I am, I would clamp up. I would shut down. What will they think? What will this partner think if I correct him when he genuinely thinks my name is Helen? Will he think I'm an idiot because I didn't say it on the first day? At this point, man, I already screwed this up. I didn't say it the first day. What is he going to think now? And so much of my life became informed of what will other people think. And it only became clear to me after that had happened for a period of time that filter was making it impossible for me to meet my full potential of performance, because I could never live into what I was capable of. Everyone else's opinions were creating an invisible ceiling on me every step of the way. And it wasn't until I figured that out and started to work through that everything unlocked.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-host DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
On today's episode, we have Henna Pryor. Henna is another world-class Limitless Minds coach, but additionally, she's a workplace performance expert, a 2-time TEDx and global keynote speaker, an Inc.com columnist and author. Henna also has led a record-breaking sales career in the search and staffing industry, which she left behind to fulfill a higher calling to inspire, teach, and coach people on how to actualize their potential. Enjoy. We have the Henna Pryor, a friend of ours for some time, and we're excited to finally get her on the podcast and feature her on this episode. Henna, you're obviously you're a world-class coach, speaker, executive sales leader, et cetera. Spent a number of years in in a number of industries, but really that search and talent industry, and really a top 1%er in that industry, and then you've taken that, all of that work and parlayed that into really just a rocket of a coaching and speaker and author space. So excited to have you on and share some of your insights with our audience. But let's make sure our audience gets a sense for some of your background, where you've come from, what's the deal. Tell us a little bit about your personal journey and where you're at, and tell us about the family and all that stuff.
Okay, love it. First of all, thank you for having me. Good to see you guys. It's been a little bit since I feel like we've all seen each other. So
yeah, no doubt.
Happy to be in the virtual room with both of you. Okay, origin story, and I'm going to try to skip over the details, but there's some details that I think matter to the origin story, which is firstborn kid of immigrant parents who came to the country with very little, and scrapped and worked hard. Made themselves comfortably middle class through hard work, effort, brute force. And as the firstborn, it was, hey, we did this all for you, right? Don't waste your shot. We're going to send you to college. Yeah. We're going to, hope that you get a good job, get those good grades. And so my beginnings were informed by, your parents did all of this for you, don't mess it up. And so there was a very strong achievement orientation. I wanted my parents' approval. I wanted to make them proud. I wanted to make my community proud. So my first job out of college was actually at Ernst & Young. I was a Big Four public accountant, prestigious international firm. My parents were thrilled. In a little under 3 years, I wanted to throw my head through the wall. I really just did not enjoy public accounting, but I learned a lot in that position. I pivoted that. That was pivot number one, to executive search and staffing. So the pivot was I was mostly doing finance and accounting search and staffing for a $2 billion publicly traded staffing firm. That ended up, to my own surprise, becoming my next 14 years, really a chance to use some of the skills. I was a finance major, so using some of the skills I'd gained in finance and accounting, but in a people job. Executive search and staffing is sales, it's commissions, it's talking to people all day, and quickly realized, oh, I'm meant to be in a people job. I like working with people. This is a lot more fun for me. And for 14 years, it was phenomenal, really, until the very last day of my 14th year. It was phenomenal. I didn't leave because I hated it. I didn't leave because I was burnt out. I just had a voice in myself that could not shut up, that kept saying, Henna, you're destined for more than this.
Yeah,
you have a calling above this. And the golden handcuffs were tight. The money was comfortable. So listening to that voice was the hardest thing I ever did. But that was pivot number two, which started as executive coaching, turned into facilitation, turned into, hey, can you come talk to my team? Can you come talk to my department? Can you come talk to my organization at our small meeting? Now it's, can you come talk to my conference, big meeting, corporate event? And I love my job. That's how we got here.
Awesome. That's so awesome. So you mentioned that voice in your mind of kind of doubt. What was that voice saying to you at that time?
I grew up with a very strong message around stability, right? Immigrant parents, they didn't have a lot when they first came to this country. So financial stability was something that was drilled into me from a very young age. So public accounting, as you can imagine, very safe, the most safe job I think that there exists. And so that voice was very loud in my head. And here I had sort of taken a chance many years ago to take this commissions only role. I remember when I sat my parents down and said, hey, I want to leave this fancy, shiny, Big Four public accounting firm to work for this firm you've never heard of and be on 100% commissions. They were like, oh, you sure about that? Right? Like, are you sure? So, luckily they trusted me enough that I was able to do that. And by the end of 14 years, they also trusted that I was successful in it. So when it came to, hey, I'm going to now essentially burn this all down and start over and actually kind of make a career change, I think the voices of doubt were really, financially, is this smart? At this point, I had gotten engaged to my soon-to-be husband. We wanted to start a family at some point. I was making a more significant pivot in that this wasn't necessarily a space that I knew. A couple of my clients had said, Henna, we should pay you for all the executive coaching you do. And I'm like, well, what's that? I don't even know what that is. And so there was a whole lot of, who am I to be advising people that are 10, 20 years my senior? What do I know that they don't know? And I don't know the first thing about opening a business. I don't know the first thing about being an entrepreneur. So those voices were very loud. And honestly, it was 2 full years of that voice screaming at me before I actually had the courage to listen to them.
That's awesome.
And what would you call that voice for people that are listening that have had or having that similar voice? What would you call that? Like, is that imposter syndrome? Is that something different? Is that what would you call that?
I like to call it head trash, and there's a reason for that. Actually, it's a very particular term. I don't like imposter syndrome. I don't like that word. Our shared colleague, Colin Henderson, and I have this conversation a lot because I'm like, it is not a syndrome. It is not an affliction that we have and have to take medication for. They are imposter thoughts that come through from time to time, and then they fade away from time to time. So I don't like the term syndrome. And I also this is not one that I feel as strongly about, but I don't like when we personify our stuff as much. Like, this is my gremlin, this is my critic. For some people, that language is helpful because they can make it a separate character and put it to the side. For me, giving it a persona almost feels like I'm giving it more power than it deserves. That's just my personal relationship with that terminology. So I like thinking of it as head trash. To me, head trash is something that is there temporarily, but it's not a person. It's not an identity that I hold. And I have the choice to decide if it's going to stay there and the litter is just going to accumulate, or if I'm going to make the intentional choice to clear it away. So I try to think of it as something that I can move. Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's book number 2, head trash.
Head trash.
Yeah. Well, Henna, I mean, like, obviously in your career in the executive search and staffing industry, you had a lot of success, right? I mean, you worked hard, you were capable, you became really great at actualizing your potential, right? And just to brag on you a little bit, those 14 years, I think you stayed in that that gold level or higher, right? As well as that Diamond Club Performer of the Year, like at least a couple of times, I believe. So I mean, you spent 14 years just being top performer, right? But a lot of people think, okay, I'm just riding this wave of success. But my guess is that during that 14-year period, it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. There was challenges. Like, how did all that success and the road and really the roadmap that took you there, how did that shape your resilience? How did that shape your adversity tolerance and psychological flexibility?
Yeah, I mean, well, the one kind of gold standard of any commissions job, depending on your job, but for me, I was in mostly direct hire, which meant every month I started at 0. I didn't have, this contract staffing flexible book where every month there was some consistency to what I was getting. Nope. Every day, every month, I hunted what I killed. There was 0. Yeah. There was 0 beginning of every year, 0 beginning of every week, 0 beginning of every month. And so I think that quickly teaches you that nothing is promised, right? The minute you rest on your laurels, that young, scrappy new person in your office is ready to come get you. I still remember, though, there was one experience in particular that I'll never forget. It was probably, 10 years into my career where I knew what I was doing. I knew how to do this job. I knew how to do it well. And there was Q1 where not only did I not close a single deal, every single deal fell apart. January, February, March, all 3 months, every single deal fell apart. Not only that, the deals that I had closed in December fell off, as in they reversed. So I was negative. I was not used to having a 0 month ever. And I was negative for the quarter. And I walked into my boss's office, Mike Masiello, and I said, Mike, I've lost my touch. Like, whatever it was, like, it's gone. I've lost my touch. And he sat me down and he goes, you are in your head big time. You know how to do this job. You know how to do this job. You do, right? And I said, I do. And he said, have you probably cut some corners just having done it so long? And I said, yeah, for sure. I've probably started to cut some corners. He said, do you know how to put one foot in front of the other in this job? Do you know how to kind of tighten up some of those corners you've been cutting? I said, yeah, I do. I said, Henna, just go do it. Stop thinking about this so much. Stop thinking about your quarter. This stuff's out of your control. Just go do it. Not only was I able to recover, I hit the President's Club trip. I made up in 3 quarters that negative that I ended with in Q1. I don't know that I did anything differently, except for he talked me off the ledge and I stopped cutting corners. It forced me to tighten up my thing. And I remember sitting in that meeting going, I can't believe I'm whining to you about this. I've had such good years here. And he goes, Henna, your problems are still problems.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like, don't add guilt on top of this. Your problems are still problems. Get back on track. Know what you want to do and how you do it, and go do it. And I think that was my first introduction to resilience being a result of process over outcome.
Yeah. I mean, what's crazy about that, Henna, is you talk about resilience. You talk about like taking the next right step, doing simple better, right? Going back to doing the things. I mean, there was some neutral, just accepting the truth for what it was. I mean, and it's so interesting that, having a leader that sees something in you or believes in you in that moment in time, even more than you believed in yourself, or, is really important. And we see that across all top performers. You on the flip side, you mentioned in your TED talk around this boss that was calling you Helen, right?
Helen.
I think he was calling you Helen. So it's almost like, and so tell me about, you said something there. You said, it makes you cringe to have to correct somebody on your name. But the risk of losing approval or the risk of losing your identity, this constant push-pull was a struggle. Unpack that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So kind of coming back to where we started around the achievement orientation, right? I grew up with this real strong pull for achievement. And with that orientation, kind of, side by side, other side of the same coin is this desire for approval, right? I want my parents to approve of me. I want people, my teachers, my community to approve of me. I'll add a little layer that, I grew up in a South Asian household, and there was an expression in our culture. They say, "Log kya kenge," which any of your brown listeners will know means essentially, what will other people think?
Mm.
It's not, does this bring you joy or is this fulfilling to you, but what will other people think?
Wow.
And that became the filter through which I think I lived my life for a long time. Not, does this bring you intrinsic joy or motivation, but what will other people think of this choice that you made, of this thing that you did? And so I, kind of came up through my career, and everything that I was deciding about the way I showed up at work, the way I behaved, what types of calls I wanted to make, what I would wear, who I would do it with, was, okay, but is this palatable to everyone else? Is this what successful henna should look like or should sound like? And so when it came to anything that I thought could be perceived as ruffling a feather or risking disapproval, as extroverted as I am, I would clamp up. I would shut down. Well, what will they think? What will this partner think if I correct him when he genuinely thinks my name is Helen? Will he think I'm an idiot because I didn't say it on the first day? At this point, man, I already screwed this up. I didn't say it the first day. What is he going to think now? And so much of my life became informed of what will other people think. And it only became clear to me after that had happened for a period of time that filter was making it impossible for me to meet my full potential of performance, because I could never live into what I was capable of. Everyone else's opinions were creating an invisible ceiling on me every step of the way. And it wasn't until I figured that out and started to work through that everything unlocked afterwards.
I just say that was such a powerful story in your TED talk. And I just think about how, I mean, even at the highest levels, people can't pronounce, presidential candidates or vice presidents' names. And you think about that, of how that makes that person feel. And so when I heard that in your TED talk, I'm like, that's something that I think Dale Carnegie says, the sweetest sound to somebody's ears is their name, the sound of their name. And so I think you spoke to a lot of people in that TED talk with that. So we really appreciate that.
DJ, I remember when we were, DJ and I spent a number of years in pharma together, and, and you got a chance to share the stage and achieve and win awards and the various things. So, obviously, you go on stage for, president's clubs or maybe like it's a philanthropic type of award or whatever it might be. And I remember DJ texted me, "Hey, listen, make sure that when so-and-so says my name, that they say Eidson," because a lot of people say Edison, because the way his name's spelled, E-I-D-S-O-N, people think or they see Edison. And so I'm texting the individual. I'm like, "Hey, Edison, not Edison. Edison." I mean, like 3 times. Sure enough, this individual was on stage and it's like, "DJ Edison, congratulations." It's just we have a good laugh about that, but it's just funny how that happens. But so when you talk about potential and actualizing potential, or peak performance, that 2-word peak performance, how would you define what peak performance is, and like how is that applied, regardless if you're in sales or if you're in staffing or if you're in an entrepreneur, a founder of a company, or an athlete, whatever it might be? Like, how would you define peak performance, and how should people be thinking about that?
Yes. Okay. I love this question, because as someone who's had to fight an achievement orientation for a long time, I was like, my potential is what will make other people proud. It's still something I fight, to be clear. I don't want to act like I've solved for it. I still too much probably live my life through, is this going to make other people proud of me? Are they going to say they're proud of me? Right. There's still a little bit of that. But what I actually find now to be true around peak performance, and I remember this is something that a coach said to me 2-3 years ago. It's actually my friend, Aaron Baker, who said this to me, and it stuck with me. Peak potential or peak performance for me now has to do with meeting either what I believe to be my imagined potential or someone else's imagined potential of me, whichever is greater. And I add that last bit because I think for some of us, I'm going to put myself in this category, the fear of not meeting my own imagined potential will keep me up at night. It's high, like impossibly high, right? I don't lose sleep over fear of failure or fear of making mistakes. I still have those fears. They're natural, but I don't lose sleep over them. I lose sleep over fear of not meeting my imagined potential, what I think I'm capable of, the quality I think I'm capable of, the reach I think I'm capable of. That will keep me up at night. I had to add that caveat though, because for some people that's the case. And for others, their potential is almost capped by their mental blocks and their thinking versus you ask somebody else who knows them well and they're like, oh no, this person's potential is here. They just don't see it yet. So that's why I say whoever's is greater, that's where peak performance, I think, has the opportunity to go or to point. That's the compass we should be using.
Well, like it peak performance or potential, they're, it's an interesting category because, I think a lot of people have a misconception, at least I believe it's a misconception, that potential is a fixed, like a fixed benchmark, right? And, I think ideally, whatever that peak potential is, hopefully that is growing. Hopefully that is moving. Hopefully as you skill up, as you learn more, as you put yourself around the right people, as you take opportunities, take risks, all of a sudden the potential is rising, right? And then you really work on, the inner game, as Colin Henderson would say, work on the inner game to try to see, like, can I close that gap? And I was listening to some comments from Nick Saban, and he talks about this capability gap, right? And the goal that he had at Alabama or as a leader was to try to get individuals to recognize that there's a capability gap and how they could close that margin between the potential and what they're actualizing. So I think that's one thing that I've really been thinking about a lot and talking to individuals like yourself that are experts in this space to kind of validate that or invalidate it, to say, like, is that something is that the right way of thinking,
I love that you just got me thinking about something. Like in real time, I'm having this is interesting. And I love to spar on this stuff. I don't think we can close the capability gap today.
Okay.
So this is my spicy take, and here's why. The rate of change in the world right now is so fast that trying to close the capability gap feels like a race none of us are going to win. So if you think about high achievers, we think about the fact that we have our goalpost, we hit it, then the goalpost moves, right? The goalpost is never stopping its movement. If you're a high achiever, it's just constantly getting pushed further out. And now add to that the rate of change. So I think it's funny as you're talking this out and we're talking this out, I almost think now when we think about peak performance, it's, creating the behaviors to give you the endurance to stay in this race, right? To stay in the swirl of the goalpost is moving, the rate of change is moving, and trying to shrink the capabilities gap. That's a day by day thing, right? On today, I might feel like, oof, I've closed it a bit. Tomorrow, some new tech evolution comes out and it's cracked wide open again. What are we doing to build the muscles, mental muscle, social muscle, physical muscle, to stay in the race? Those are the people now who I think are going to be, heralded as peak performers.
Yeah. I think the acknowledgement too, that there is a gap and that there is a need for improvement. I think that's one of the, as you're kind of talking through it, I'm like, what makes a top performer a top performer? It is this aggregate of marginal gains. It is this constantly trying to get better on a regular basis, putting people around them, like you had mentioned, that can see things in them that, like a Nick Saban or like the coach that you had. And so, that's how you ultimately close that gap if it can be done. But no, it's a really good point. You mentioned that seeking approval of others and kind of what do others think of me? And I was thinking about this as you were answering questions. How does self-awareness play into that? Like, you want to be able to, not really care as much what people think, but you also have to have self-awareness, right? I mean, so how do those two play together?
Yes. Well, okay. So I don't want to make this idea of caring what other people think into a one size fits all monster. First things first, we do live in a social culture. Many of us work on teams. So I think the majority of the people listening to this podcast are not astronauts or polar explorers who work completely in isolation, right? Most people do work as part of a team or a social structure of some sort. And it does matter a little that we are social, that we are likable, that we get along, that you look at others as part of our decision-making, that this is part of it. I think where we need to become aware of our own biases, our own thoughts is, when does that become our primary motivator? Is I'm only doing this because it's what I think other people want. And when are we not taking action towards our values because the approval tendency has become so strong that it's outweighing that? So back to the TEDx example, I am someone who cares deeply about being called the right name. In fact, I will defend someone else. Actually, was at a conference recently, and a girl came by, and my sweet friend was like, "Hey, Tara, hey." And she walked away. The girl walked away. And I said to my friend, because I know this matters to my friend, I said, "Hey, just heads up, she goes by Tara." And I said, I know you'd want to know that. And she goes, "I would want to know that. Thank you so much." Right. Yeah. Easy for me to say to her, probably at a period of my time, harder for me to say, "Hey, it's Henna, by the way." Right. Like, it would have taken me a lot longer. So I think that's where it becomes important to know, what's more important to you. Is it staying in line with a value? Is it staying in line with something that drives you? Is it moving towards a specific goal? Or is it in that moment social approval? Sometimes maybe it's social approval. That's okay. It's not every time it's going to be this, but just know the difference. And so I think that's where that awareness piece comes in, is know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and also know what is the trade-off on the other side. And that takes knowing yourself to know that.
Yeah. You mentioned social.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I love how it almost being like a name ally, right? Stepping in, right? It's stepping in that situation, and I think we can all do that, do a better job of that in terms of, because it is that point still, like, if you correct somebody in the moment, you lose their approval. But like I said, or do you not correct them and lose your identity? Like that's like, I don't want people to not hear that. That's the struggle when we talk about something as simple as a name, and like, how do we become allies so that we can point that out? And I think that's a great example of what you did there.
Yeah. Eitzen is a family name for you. It's an ancestral name. It's representative of people who've come before you. And so it's about more than that. Right. And I think does it matter enough? Maybe for some people who married into a name that doesn't mean that much to them, and they're like, I don't care.
And I mean, there's a certain too, like, I always think about LeBron's name. Right. That's not where people don't mess it up, because he's respected, he's acknowledged, he's seen, he's heard, he's been, and so his name is pronounced correctly across the board. And so, how do we do that with everyone, regardless of how much you make? What's your status in the world, whatever it is. Right. And again, you can say Schwarzenegger, Tchaikovsky. You can't say Henna? Okay, got it. Obama.
I always thought his name was LeBron. I didn't know.
Everybody except Harry. Okay.
The more you know.
Learn something new every day. Actually, you mentioned, that the kind of that social, approval and awareness and so on and so forth. You and I, Henna, were talking the other day about like a research, study that you're building and forging a path to. I really want to hear more about it, because we didn't get a chance to talk. And also, I feel like our audience should hear about this too. So, like, it's a research study on social fitness and social muscle atrophy in the workplace. Tell us a little bit about that. What are you forging? Why is it important to you? What should we know?
Yeah, I'm about to put my nerd hat on again. I'm very excited about this. So I have partnered with a research firm, a PhD-led research firm, and I am conducting the first ever study on social muscle atrophy in the workplace. So what this means is, and here's the thesis, we are dealing with a social crisis in the workplace. I cannot tell you how many times I have had leaders come to me, either before a conference, before an event, saying, my people are working in silos. They're not collaborating. They're not having the tough conversations. I think so far in 2024, I have keynoted at least 5 conferences where the theme was one ABC company, one XYZ company. They're all so desperate to figure out, why are we not talking? Why are we not working as one? U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy just went to the UK, and he just came back with some data that UK teenagers are struggling to talk offline because they are so used to talking online.
Mm-hmm.
This is our next generation of workers in 4 or 5 years, right? We know that this is across the board because this isn't an introvert extrovert conversation anymore. Even the extroverts among us, raising my hand, felt the experience of social muscle atrophy when we all started to return from the pandemic, when we all started to convene in person again. And we're like, oh, I can't read this person's face. Are they mad at me? They're furrowing their brow. What's going on? The tone, I can't, what's happening there? Because we got out of practice. This is actually old research. Again, polar explorers, astronauts, when they came back, they forgot how to people, right? We all experienced this post-pandemic. And so what we're exploring in this study are just some really interesting workplace consequences. So there's some obvious stuff, out of a Harvard, Robert Waldinger study found workplace loneliness. People don't have a best friend. That stuff we know. What is less explored and what I'm excited to unearth in this study is some of those bigger consequences. We've learned that when social muscle atrophies, there's actually a real risk for let me rephrase this, a different lack of success when it comes to cross-functional work. So when we're high achievers and we don't exercise our social muscle, we tend to over-specialize. We tend to want to just kind of put our head down and do what we're good at, rather than risking what it might mean to go cross-functional, which then potentially has downline effects on business continuity, right? Somebody goes down and we're not talking to each other. Guess what? That's going to hurt a lot more because you don't know what that other person even does for a job. There's some other consequences around, what it means for creativity and innovation at work, what it means for ideation. So there's all these really interesting business consequences that we're going to explore through this lens, but we can already see the output issues that are coming from this muscle not being exercised and it not being intentional, all worse in a hybrid workplace, in a remote workplace. That's not to say that those things don't have value. They do. But how do we create now mechanisms and intention behind making sure that those things don't become a huge problem that we have a hard time course correcting and reversing?
That's fascinating. And even you'll see things come across your social media feed where they'll show a group of kids in, 1992, on the beach or at a concert, and everybody's talking and communicating, and it's very different now. With the research that you've done thus far, and I know it's still ongoing, as a leader, how do I get better at facilitating and creating an environment for social fitness?
Yes, I love this question. So the first thing here is that intention is paramount. So if you think about previous social structure, so first let's talk personal and then we'll talk like a workplace. Personal is when we were kids, not to age us here, but I think we're in a similar age bracket, all of us. We used to play outside with kids and we had to make up our own social rules, right? There weren't rules set for us. We actually had to learn the skill of social negotiation. Okay, you're in charge over here. Now I'm doing this. Now I'm going to take this role on. We were forced to learn how to do that. That is less so the case. Kids are not playing outside, just randomly making up their own social structures anymore. It's just not happening. Now in the workplace, it used to be some of these social norms, some of these conversations were happening in the hallways, water cooler chat. There's actually some data that's starting to emerge about the loss of the informal transfer of knowledge that used to happen when we just refilled our water at the same time, right? Harry and I are refilling our water bottles and be like, what'd you think of that thing? Oh, yeah, interesting, right? Informal transfer of knowledge, no longer happening. So, A1A over of all of this is intention. Are we craving and creating intentional spaces for people to connect at a deeper social level, not just talk about work, right? It can't just be, we have this problem, now we're going to solve for it. That's why we're going to talk. Hey, I need an answer from you. Now I'm going to Slack you. That's why we're going to talk. What are we doing to create social structure? So there's been some really interesting ideas floating around. Some companies are starting social gyms, right? Or, at the top of a meeting, I suggest to leaders at a minimum, carve out 5 minutes at the top of that meeting for something that doesn't have to do with work. Your people do not get to know each other in the halls anymore. So we actually have to carve out very intentional spaces for that. This is not easy for people whose mindset is go, go, go. Things are swirling. We're in disruption. We have a lot to do today. And yet, if we don't, there's significant cost. So, at the highest level, create intentional space. Then we can talk about small talk. We can talk about how we create the spaces for the right types of conversations, right? We can go 20 layers deeper, but it starts with intention. We need to create the space now.
Yeah. I think I think we'll have to have you come back on for a whole nother episode
Yeah,
on
I'd
this.
love to.
That's really
as
excited
a
to hear more about
founder,
that.
as a founder and of a company, and DJ may feel the same as a founder. We started a company kind of right on the cusp of COVID, and then obviously, have built from there. And so we've always just been this hybrid organization, hybrid virtual organization, individuals living across the country, even internationally, in Latin America, et cetera. And there have been times where it's kept me up at night that, I don't get to see our people, and we don't get to see each other, and we don't get to have those informal, conversations that lead to innovation and decision making and solutions that happen organically. And like, how do you solve for it? Right? You've already kind of started the company. You've already kind of created a precedent. Like, so what's the future look like at a company like Limitless Minds, or anybody's company that's listening now? Like, what are the strategies? What are the decisions we need to make? How do we have a bias for action around solving for it? So again, we'll set that up as like a part 2 with Henna, but I think we can actually probably leverage the research and what kind of some of the outcomes from
Harry's a closer. You're a closer, man. Like, you just, halfway through the podcast, this man is already secured. Yeah, pull your calendar up.
You will be coming back. Right, exactly.
Noted.
I love it. I got a question that I was thinking that the question is probably a longer question than I want it to be. So I'm just gonna frame it up this way and see where we go. So do you think that from a social fitness perspective, the combination of obviously COVID, the journey that we all had with COVID, plus, social media and virtual platforms like this one, Zoom, Google, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, et cetera. Do you think that there's some evolution in people that are extroverted, beginning to kind of tap into their introversion in some ways, like almost kind of evolving from extroverts to introverts? Do you think that that's happening? Do you know anything about that? Like,
I don't think I know. There is some research about this that started to come out. It's actually, it's a little bit more complex than are they becoming introverted, because this is an important distinction. Introverts still want to be seen. Introverts still crave connection. They just experience their sociability different, meaning they just need to recharge their batteries, etc. It's not that extroverts have become more introverted. It's truly, more what we've described, which is the muscle of sociability has not had as many opportunities to practice. So extrovert, I identify as an extrovert. After the pandemic, I love to spend time with friends. I used to number one thing in life would be have a big dinner with friends. And I remember after that first big dinner, I was exhausted. I was like, oh my God, haven't done that in a while, right? It's without making it oversimplistic, it is analogous to you used to be a gym rat and then you didn't go for a year and then you picked up that weight and you're like, dang, that shouldn't hurt that bad. But it's not because you all of a sudden changed and you're no longer capable of being a gym rat, or that's not your wiring anymore. It's a muscle that went dormant. It just wasn't exercised. It wasn't picked up in a while. And I think even extroverts today don't have to pick up the phone, don't have to go meet somebody. We can send the Slack, we can send the text, we can get into the complexities of some of these other channels, help us avoid fear of rejection, which is true of introverts and extroverts. It's easier to swipe and get rejected that way than go to the bar and say, hey, can I get your number? And somebody makes a face at you. All of these things are just feeding into our human tendencies. But, generally, I don't think anyone's turning into an extrovert or turning into an introvert. I think we just all need to have some awareness around the usage of these muscles. And I truly believe, similar to foreign languages, that if we don't use it, if we don't occasionally in the grocery store, hey, I love the way your shoes look, or something, make these moments part of our fabric of how we live our days, that these muscles will go dormant. And then when we need to have a tough conversation with our boss, we need to have a negotiation conversation, good luck. That muscle has not picked up a 2-pound dumbbell, let alone this 50-pound dumbbell that you're about to pick up. So it's fascinating. The research on this is really an emerging place. And I'm excited to talk about what comes out of the workplace study, but it is increasingly the case. What you're observing, it looks that way from the outside.
I love how you are leaning into not just a fixed, okay, this is what I coach to, this is what I speak to, but as the environment evolves, society evolves, your audience evolves, you're giving them real valuable resources on how they can continue to move their career forward, their profession forward, their lives forward. Harry mentioned, and we've talked about your speaking, your coaching. You're also an author, right? And
Yep.
and you had a chance to write your first book. What inspired you to write that book? And then also tell us a little bit about what's in the book and how it impacts people.
Yes. So thank you. I appreciate all the nice words. And just to maybe draw a line into what I think a lot of the podcast material has been here with us as a group and as Limitless Minds as a team is, the social fitness journey and social muscle atrophy is directly tied to our mindset, right? This is a mental game first. You're not going to get out of your own way as a social creature without doing that the awareness work, the mindset work. I mean, it's all inextricably connected. So it's not a new lane. It's just an expansion of the lane. I think that's really how we're looking at it. And frankly, the book, I think really the first half of the book focuses on the mindset journey. So the book is called Good Awkward, and it is exploring the emotion of awkwardness in the workplace. And I realized it is an emotion that was not talked about. It was not explored. So my origin story is I felt awkward my whole life. Firstborn of immigrants. My food smelled different. My hair was different. My clothes were different. I always felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. I didn't really come into some version of confidence really till late high school, really college. But then when I got to my professional career, every one of those feelings of like little Henna came back again. It was like, oh God, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Oh, they're going to think I'm an idiot. Oh, they think she's doing it wrong, right? Every one of those emotions came roaring back. And I remember Brene Brown, our Queen Brene, at the end of her podcast interviews and things, she would use this expression, stay awkward, brave, and kind. That was her tagline, stay awkward, brave, and kind. And I remember every time I heard that, I would think, God, I love you, Brene. Stay kind. Yes. Stay brave. Yes. But I don't know about stay awkward. Like, no, I've been trying to fight this my whole life. I don't agree with you here. And so it made me get very curious about the role of this specific emotion. How does that emotion, awkwardness, embarrassment, cringe, which seems to be the new, millennial, you're so cringe, you're so cringe. You are going to be cringe if you're doing something that is not in line with what everybody else deems socially palatable. If all of a sudden being cringe means carving out a lane for yourself that is not the same as what everyone else is doing, and we're worried about that, Lord help us, everyone. So the book was really designed to be an analysis into what are our mindsets, what's standing in the way of our success, our peak potential, our peak performance, and then a set of actionable tools on how do we actually rewrite those mindsets so that our behaviors then follow and we can take the risks and the chances that we need to take to meet that potential.
You made me feel a lot better because my daughters 16 and 14 often call me cringy. So,
of course.
But what I'm going to tell them, I'm a good cringe. I'm
yes,
good awkward.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. We all are. Anyone who's going to do anything, excuse my language, worth a damn is going to be good awkward. They're going to be good cringe. And otherwise, play small. We're not making you do anything.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I love that. So, Henna, also, you do some really great work with Chief. And I would love for you to tell those that aren't familiar with Chief, what Chief is, but there you focus on empowering women leaders, emerging and, in highly successful long-term women in leadership. And what specific challenges do you see women facing today in leadership roles, and how can they best overcome these barriers, to thrive in their careers and at home, work, et cetera?
Sure. Okay. So we don't have 3 days to answer this question. So I'll try to give you my best. So Chief is a women's network for directors, C-suite, and VP level women, kind of modeled after this idea that for years, for generations, there were these men's clubs where professional men could talk about, things over the golf course and whatever. And there was not a space like that specifically for women who, just on a numbers standpoint, do not typically, once they hit VP, director, C-suite, look around the executive table and see many other women. That's just a numbers thing. No opinion needed. That's a numbers thing. And so Chief was designed to create spaces for minded, leveled women to be able to talk about the unique challenges. So some of those challenges, again, of which there are many, but, sadly, even 5 years following the worst of the pandemic, we saw a mass exodus of women in leadership. So all the work we had done to create some seats at the table, unfortunately, in the pandemic, much of that got reversed as a survival mechanism. Women left the workforce in droves at that level of leadership. So now we're trying to rebridge that gap to find voices that are representative at that level. But we're also still dealing with, and I think this is every other answer I give you is going to be underneath of this category, which is women are still disproportionately scrutinized for their behaviors and actions because we are working in a system that for decades was created by largely, not exclusively, but largely white, cisgendered, heterosexual men. These are the people that created business as we know it for decades. And so often what is considered appropriate or normal or fits the corporate culture or whatever, turn of phrase we want to use is, again, but by nobody's real fault, this is just the system we all grew up in, is a system that was created by white cisgendered heterosexual men. And so a lot of times when women do something that is different or maybe against the norm, against the fabric of what is expected, we are still dealing with, and especially women of color, add another layer on top of that, a disproportionate level of scrutiny from when that doesn't feel like what somebody expected or wanted. We're expected that confidence looks a certain way. Confidence, that should look like flawlessness to a lot of people, right? Lots of different things. Negotiation should look a certain way. Your voice, your tone, your assertiveness should look and sound a certain way. So I think women on any of those million factors that will fall underneath all of that, we're just constantly fighting this rewriting of what does a female in leadership or a professional female, an ambitious female, what does she look like? What does she sound like? And how can we create systems around us that support this next generation of ambitious women? Because we're not going anywhere.
That's right.
Let's all adjust. Let's all adjust.
I love it. Is there one, like, as you think about it, and I know we said we could talk about this for hours, right?
Yeah.
But is there one thing that stands out to you that we can change as men today that would help take the next right step forward in this area?
Gosh, vocal allyship. Like vocal allyship. Invite us into the conversation, invite us into the room, invite us to the table. Like I'm spicy enough that I'll make sure my opinion is heard, right? I'll raise my hand and be like, I have something to add to this and I didn't get a chance to say it yet, right? That's me. There's a lot of women who struggle to do that. And so if you've got females on your team and you've got a, team meeting, there's 8 people there, 2 of whom are female, and they're sitting in this Zoom meeting and they have not said a word. Invite them into the conversation. Say, hey, Jennifer, you've been sitting here wonderfully taking notes. I'd love to hear anything you'd add to this conversation, anything that's not clear. Sometimes that invitation is really helpful. And, similarly, speak our names into the room when we're not there. Right. Jennifer's not here, but she really was a huge asset on this project. We couldn't have gotten over the hump without her. We need vocal male allies.
That's really good.
It's one thing to think it, but please externalize.
And that was really specific too. I think those are 2 very specific things that we can do as men. That's good stuff. Really good stuff.
Yeah. I think one of the things I like that you talk about it quite a bit is storytelling, the power of storytelling. Whether it be, as somebody trying to sell the deal or sell the product, or in leadership in particular, whether you're a male or female in leadership, just, take us through quickly, just kind of the importance of that framework of storytelling and how you see it, how you see, why it's so important.
Yeah. So my personal take on story is, yes, what I'm not going to talk about today is be able to speak in more colorful language and in more details and all that. There's an art to storytelling that's beautiful. And I think other people can teach that, and I can teach it as well. But for today, what I would say is modern storytelling really has to do with tapping into a person's emotion as quickly as possible. All of us are, dealing with disruption, dealing with swirl. We're busy, we're distracted, we're struggling to focus. Obviously, if you work with Limitless Minds, you're better at these things than others, but many of us are struggling with these things. What a well-told or well-placed story, which by the way, does not have to have a once upon a time, here's the middle, happily ever after. When we talk about story, it's an anecdote, an example, a case study, something specific that speaks to the point. What a story can do better than any other tool in our toolbox is get right to the emotion of something very, very quickly, right? So I can sit here and tell you about how women are disproportionately scrutinized because we're held to a level of flawlessness that is supposed to translate to confidence. I could tell you that, but if time was short, I didn't have much of your attention. I could tell you about this one time that, I was in a room and I was asked for my opinion and literally, stumbled on my first words, and they're like, Henna's not ready yet, move on. Two sentence story.
Yeah.
It was a 2-sentence story, and it has happened to me, by the way. That tells you everything you need to know about the standard that women are held against when confidence or readiness needs to translate to flawlessness. I stumbled over a word once, and it was, she's not ready, move on. Right. So that today is the power of using strategic story, even in bite sizes, to hit the emotional button in an attention deficit world when we need it. And I think in sales and leadership and all these things, story, like everything else, you're going to notice a theme with me, is a muscle. It is a muscle we can flex. We can get better at it. I'm not a natural storyteller like some of our other room tilters are. I think for me, it's a learned skill, and I've had to get better at it. But that's the beauty of it. It's learnable, and we can all get better at it.
Well, you've told some good ones today, and we really
practiced.
And listen, and it's we really appreciate it. I think because it's like you can have some of these podcast episodes, you listen to podcasts, and it's like, that sounds good, but there's no real actionable things that are shared. You shared a lot of actionable insights, and again, we're thankful for that. As we close here, any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our listeners with as we close out?
No, this was great. I'm just grateful for the platform, grateful to work with the two of you. And I think, just as far as a final parting plea, maybe to the audience, is that the world is continuing to evolve at a rate unlike anything we've ever seen. And that can either scare us. For many people, that puts us, in the fetal position, right? The rate of change is so fast. We're in this tech super cycle. We're in this, social crisis. We're in all these things. We can let that scare us, or we can look at that as the world's greatest opportunity. If you have been someone who's like, I know I'm capable of more, and I'm just looking for the right direction to take myself in, consider this the great reset, right? The skills that used to be the thing that were most valued, it's all being upended. The cart is being flipped, which I think for all of us gives us an opportunity to start fresh and level the playing field. So look at it as an opportunity, and your potential is like literally closer than it's ever been. So I hope you're as excited about it.
Yeah, listen, first time this season, Harry, just got chills. The great reset. I'm serious. I just got, because that is really, really powerful. If this is a moment in time, an opportunity, you reset, you figure out what the landscape really is about, and then you add value based on what we're truly seeing right now in this moment in time. And that's the great reset. So where can we learn more about you and find out and follow you and all that?
Henna Pryor in all the places. LinkedIn is my preferred playground, but I'm also Henna Pryor on Instagram. HennaPryor.com will redirect you to my website, and Good Awkward is everywhere books are sold. And I've got an ink column too. So if you want to just rap in small doses, that's a fun place too.
Guys, it's Henna Pryor, not Helen. Okay.
Not Helen.
Henna Pryor.
Well played.
I love it. Well, Henna, obviously, thanks for coming and joining us. We could make this a few hour long, but I already got the part 2 committed to. So
yes,
that's good.
Closer. That boy went back to selling. Harry Wilson, man. My you said we talk best friend at work. My best friend at work, Harry Wilson.
I love it.
There you go.
I love it. I can't say no to either of you, and you know it. So good. Well played.
That's good.
Well, we appreciate all the insights. This was really great. I mean, I think in this kind of plea for the great reset, we want our listeners to remember what we always say: you don't have to be sick to get better. We'll see you on the next episode.